what I want to talk today about is story, right? We're going to start to talk about story because that is the foundation upon which everything is built in regards to giving out information about making a film or making branded content or shooting a doc. It's all narrative, right? It's all about story. So we're going to spend a portion talking about what are the elements of story and what is the power of story, why is it important? And then we're going to get into the visual storytelling aspect, using what a director uses, the shot, as the word, how do they communicate. And we'll start breaking down the considerations that go into a shot, what may be and what may not be effective. We'll look at some examples of that. And then, time permitting, I also wanted to give a bit about how we direct performances. That may not be germane to your disciplines here. Maybe you're not working with actors that you casted, but you are working with subjects, with characters, right? Whether that's a doc or you're doing broadcast journalism. So I do think that some of the tools that I've acquired and have been taught could be applicable to your respective trades. So that's an overview of what we're going to do in the next 3 hours. And as I said, we'll have a little bit of exercise in there, a little bit of workshop in there. So I pose the question, why is storytelling important? And anybody can answer this. Anybody? Why is storytelling? So we'll ask why is storytelling important, and then we'll get into what makes for a good story. But why is storytelling important? Mm-hmm. Yeah, for connection, for sure. It's the way in which that we understand the world, right? If we are told a good story, we're able to hopefully get to the place where we empathize with the characters in that story, whether they're fictional or they're real. So for sure. It's an evolutionary trait. Passing of stories is something that has evolved as humans. And so it helps us with our survival because stories are a way in which for us, it's like a dress rehearsal in the mind. When we're told a story, we're envisioning it. And then when we're in that situation, we recall those stories as to what might have worked or what didn't work, however that tale ended. But really, why is story important? Because it's literally the only thing that works. When you're trying to give out information, it's the most effective way to give out information. Data and facts, some people might retain them. But if you couch that in a story, if you're able to take whatever information it is that you've been asked to disseminate and you can put that into a narrative, it's been proven that a human is 22 times more likely to remember those facts if that is enveloped within a narrative. So if you can embed those facts into a story, there's going to be retention. Why is it important? Because it aids in cognitive development and acts as a stimulator and training for the mind. As I was saying, when we hear a story, it's a dress rehearsal for the brain. It enables us to think through the process, and then if we're in that situation, we can recall on that. Story is important because it's a persuasive tool. We use it. We use information, right? Whether we want to say the word propaganda, which might sound negative, or manipulation, which might sound negative. No, that's what we do as filmmakers. That's our job. Our job is to manipulate the audience, to make them feel a certain way, to make them root for our main character, our protagonist, to make them root against the antagonist, to make them laugh, to make them cry. That's manipulation. That's propaganda. That's fine. It's also entertainment, right? But it's giving out the facts. And stories are a powerful tool for that because of emotion. It's emotion that changes the mind, not reason. Right? We don't change our behavior based on reason. You see this in politics all the time. The politician that tells a better narrative is the politician that gets more votes. It's not about the facts. It's never been about the facts. It's about the story. So if you're trying to persuade somebody, if you're trying to win the hearts and minds of a population, you need to tell a good story. This is a quote from Steven Pinker, is a cognitive scientist, a well-regarded and well-written. Emotions are the mechanisms that set the brain's highest levels goals. And so it's through the emotions that dictate what we want as human beings. And where do we get that emotion? We get it through the protagonist, in our stories, in our narratives. It's also been proven that negative stories are great at preventing action. So if you're telling a cautionary tale because you don't want someone to do something. Positive stories are a way in which you motivate action. So there was an interesting study where they, in this one hospital, they they put cameras in the rooms. The idea was they were saying, look, you're under surveillance, make sure you're washing your hands. There was a whole idea about cleanliness. And they didn't see the rate of cleanliness go up at all, maybe 10% when they put the cameras in the room. But the minute they started a very progressive and positive campaign about what a great job they were doing, and they were saying, okay, this is really great, we're seeing better scores, less infection, then they saw it go up by 90%. The idea being that they were using positivity to spur an action. Negativity will prevent action. And we use it. I mean, I use it in my own life. So for example, if I'm walking with my 2-year-old son, and I could say, hey, look, son, when we're walking down the street, that street is very dangerous. 5 people were hit this year walking across the street, not looking which way they were going. That's one way that might be effective. A better, more effective way of me telling him the story is to actually tell a story about a boy who got hit by a car on that particular street. And that will resonate with him so much more than just saying the facts, right? And that would be a case of negative, right? But I don't want him to walk into the street, and that's why I would use it in that situation. Stories force us to see patterns, associations, affiliations, even when they do not exist. So we'll see examples of that, but stories are how we relate, right? If we're telling stories and that story is effective, it has some universal truth that it doesn't matter your culture, your background, your language, your field, whatever it might be. There's something that's relatable. There's an association to that. We look for stories. As human beings, we're always looking to find the story in something. We think in stories. Think about it. When you think about maybe what's going to happen in the future, you're seeing the story in your head. If you think about the past, you're seeing the story in your head. So it's the way in which we understand the world. It's the best way to give information. It's the best way to manipulate, persuade. It can be persuasive, a call to action or inaction, and also it allows us to codify our beliefs about the world. It helps us shape our worldview. So obviously, stories are a very important tool. So then, what is story? What is a story? What are the key components to a story?
Very basic beginning, middle, and end.
Beginning, middle, and end, without doubt.
Conflict, foreshadowing.
Mm-hmm. I like the basic. We'll stick with the basic. So beginning, middle, end. I'll throw up a few slides about the 3-act structure: beginning, middle, and end, for sure. So I guess I'd say that would be like the paradigm or the story structure. What do we need to have a complete story? What are the elements that we actually need within that beginning, middle, and end? Your character, right? Yeah, you need a character or a set of characters. And that character has what? Well, we always jump to problem first. That's funny. But because we definitely need a problem, because we need conflict. Without conflict, it's not interesting, right? Without conflict, you actually don't have character. But in order to have a problem, that problem would come after they have a goal, right? A goal, an objective. So in order to have a story, we have a character who wants something, and then we have conflict, a problem, an obstacle to that goal. That's it. I mean, that's when we boil it down. That's what we need for an effective story. And of course, we can have, talk about things like plot, and we will, and foreshadowing, and these are different devices that we use within storytelling. But sometimes I think we overcomplicate it. That's basically it. You have a character who wants something, and there's an obstacle in their way. And do they overcome or not overcome that obstacle? That's what we go to watch. And what is at stake? What if they don't? And so for me, that's it. We boil it down to the story. But here's a definition for you if you want. A story is how what happens affects someone who is trying to achieve what proves to be a difficult objective, and then how they have changed as a result of that journey. Because that's also important too. Having an arc. The character has an arc. What did the character learn? Because that is the premise of what you're setting out to prove. What did the character learn along that journey? How did they change from point A to point B? And so that's our definition. We can break that down. So what happens is the plot, right? That's literally what happens in the story. That someone is the main character, our protagonist. The goal, that's the story question that you set out to answer. So is this person capable of doing this? Or is this goal achievable? Is it even a valid goal? And then the change, that is the premise or the spine of the story. Maybe because I have a 3-year-old son, or maybe because it's just true, I think that animated films do a great job of telling story, right? Because they keep it fairly simple. And actually, the executive vice president of my academy, he always likes to reference, because he too has young children. Has anyone ever seen Despicable Me? So what is that story about? Who's our main character? Gru, yeah. And what is his goal? To be a bad guy, right? To be the world's best villain. And so in order to do that, he's going to do what? He's going to steal the moon. Right. So that's our character, right? Our character, that's his goal. He wants to be the world's best villain. And in order to do that, he's going to steal the moon. So that's his objective. His super objective is to be the best villain. His real super objective is to actually have a sense of self-worth, right? We learn that later on. But then what happens in the story? Yeah. He adopts the girls, right? Or he meets these girls. He's going to use the girls as a way to get into the arch-villain's house to steal the shrink ray. But then, like any good story, he realizes that he actually loves the girls, right? And then what then becomes his goal? Or how did that change him? Well, then it's not about being a villain anymore, right? It's about trying to be a good father and having love. And he realized all along that what he wanted, what he thought was getting the moon, that's what he needed. That's not what he needed. What he needed was just some love in his life. He needed someone to take care of, to be a parent. And so that would be the spine of that. Okay, so let's talk about then the aims of an effective story. So when you're thinking of your story, the first thing you think about is, what is your goal? What message do you want to carry? How do you want the audience to feel at the end of your story? So an effective one considers how they will feel going into it and how they will feel leaving it. So you have to understand this before you even put pen to paper. What is the goal you want? We need to grab the attention, right? You need to grab their attention. That seems like an obvious one. But why would someone want to listen to your story? What devices are you using to hook them in and to reel them in? And we'll talk about plot points when we get to the 3-act structure. That's one way we do it. We need to engage them. Why would somebody care about your story? Well, everyone gets their cues from the protagonist, right? We want to be able to care about that character. There has to be something redeeming in them. We have to want what they want. So we have to have an engaging protagonist. Something must be at stake. So there must always be something at stake in your story. If the character doesn't get this is what will happen. This is what they will lose. If there's nothing at stake, nobody cares, right? Who would care to watch a story if there's nothing at risk, there's nothing at stake? The story must have an arc, as we already talked about. The main character needs to go through something, have a transformation, and by the end of the story, come out differently. And then you also want to enable. You want your story to be something that people will want to share and talk about after having had that experience. So how do you make your story memorable and easy to retell? So those would be the aims of an effective story of communication. What are the different components of a complete story? Truthfulness, right? That's obviously important, especially I'd imagine, you know what you do obviously better than I do, but I imagine truthfulness is number one. You can lie to an audience once. That's it, right? Because they're not coming back to watch it again. So truthfulness is very important in storytelling. Conflict, right? It's through conflict that character is understood. This is actually a great quote, not from me. I should have put it in quotes. That's David Mamet. David Mamet said, "Without conflict, you have no character. Without character, you have no action. Without action, you have no story." And then he went on to say, "Without story, you have no screenplay," because he was talking about writing a screenplay. We're talking about story in general. And so what does that mean? Without conflict, you have no character. How do you interpret that? Right. There has to be something going on with that person, without a doubt, right? They need to have some action, right? They need to be doing something. But even more so, it's through conflict that character is revealed. Who we are as people in the face of adversity, says a lot, right? Who is this character? When the chips are down, are they going to fight harder and then continue to pursue their goal, or are they going to pack it in? And that's what I mean by character. So we're talking about character. Sure, there are characters in my story, but character as a human being. What are we made of? And without having conflict, without having adversity, there's no way to show that. So conflict is a way of demonstrating character. So you must have conflict. That conflict can be internal or external. Obviously, if it's internal conflict, we have to find a way to visualize that and to show that on the screen if we're working in film or print or doc. Everybody understands the difference between internal and external conflict, right? You would say so if you didn't, right? We have that trust. All right. Drama. So what is the difference between drama and conflict? They seem very similar. Well, drama is anticipation mingled with uncertainty. So it's like, the king of drama was Alfred Hitchcock. You knew that something was going to happen. You just didn't know how it was going to end. Right? And so there's always that famous lesson they teach in film classes about, there are two ways of telling a story where, like, say we have an explosion go off. Well, one director, maybe Michael Bay, you might have two people sitting at a table and a bomb goes off. Hitchcock would show you the bomb and then cut to the people and then cut to the bomb and then cut to the people, right? Creating that tension, creating that drama. And so drama is what hooks people, right? You pose a question and you keep the audience watching to find they want to see the answer to that. They want to see, do they get out of that situation? So it's a little bit different than conflict. It's anticipation mingled with uncertainty. And then last one is relatability. So, and this goes back to like the points about why our story is important. Relatability. So the characters must have something in them that other people can relate to. And again, that really oftentimes comes from your premise, from whatever that through line or log line might be. What does the character want? When we watch a film, we want to be able to sit there and say, hey, there's a little bit of me in that character. I can see that, or I know somebody like that. If your characters are relatable, the audience will empathize with them. So it's important that you create relatable characters, common goals. And it's not hard. I mean, if you can pretty much boil any story you've ever heard down to maybe 6 or 7 different stories, right? It's like love conquers all, or material wealth will not bring happiness, or goals. All goals are pretty much common. We all just want love and happiness in our lives. It's pretty simple. We want safety and security and whatever that brings, but it boils down to just being happy. So if we see that within your character, we will relate to them. Any questions thus far? So let's then just do a quick exercise. I thought because we do have some photographers in the room, right? Yes. All right. So you know about story and photography, but I thought for others we should talk about how a photograph can be a story. What is your brain tell you? Right now, when you look at this photograph, what is that story?
Some people are angry because it's like kind of an inappropriate dance. Maybe back when people were conservative. It looks like
This is not a Dirty Dancing remake. They did remake that.
It looks like people are angry in the background, but I can't really tell from back here.
Yeah.
It looks like they're just like,
For dancing, basically.
they're having a ball. Yeah, they're letting loose.
Having a great time.
Yeah, that lady was there.
Oh, because
Yeah.
her skirt. It's her skirt. There we go.
I don't know about her everything.
Well, I mean,
So, okay, that's what we see. So what we now you can see her everything. So that's what we see, but what is the story? If you had to construct the narrative, and you already are, the point of this exercise is that your brain already is. Your brain's already telling you a narrative. Your brain's already saying what this is about. You're looking at just a still image. Obviously, you're picking up on the cues of the people's reactions and to their faces and to their body language. What is the story here?
we're going to go ahead and live our lives and dance our dance and be happy who we are despite what you all think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And with whom do we empathize? The old lady.
And them are going, I wish we could do that.
Yeah.
You know, cut loose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes, and they're conveniently wearing Ray-Ban glasses. This is from a Ray-Ban ad, right? So it does make you want to be like them. But the idea being, yes, so we all have written a narrative in our mind when we saw this, right? It seems like most of us are aligned. Here are some people having a good time. That's kind of disrupting the normal flow of life for the other people. Those young kids are out of control, but they're the ones who are having all the fun while everyone else is standing around being bitter about the fact that they're having fun. And they don't have Ray-Bans. Yeah. That is true. That's what they're all missing. No one else in that photograph is wearing glasses.
Imagine if they were wearing Oakleys.
Would they be having as much fun? More fun. What is the story here? She got a bee in her hair?
She just failed her exam. Yeah, definitely she got some bad.
Yeah, she does not look happy to me either. She just got off work at Disneyland, and she wears the mask, and that's why she's scratching her head. That could be the narrative. Uh-huh. Okay, have you all ever seen, what was that one? That was just a photograph. It wasn't from a campaign. It was just a personal photograph. It was in New York. Yeah, it wasn't of me, but it was one that I own. Yeah, that I took. So let's look at, this was an interesting experiment in 1944, as you can see on the screen. I believe it was at UMass. But reinforcing the idea that we look for stories, we look for patterns everywhere in our lives. So we saw it in two stills. Obviously, one had a bit more of a story to it, a bit more robust, and just a woman holding her head. But still, your brain, to make sense of the world, we write stories every day. We look at something, we tell narratives. I mean, you do this, right? I mean, you all do this. You look at somebody, whether it's on the subway, well, I say subway, that's my frame of reference. I ride the subway every day. Or you're in a public space, the way that someone's acting, your brain automatically thinks about, that's a horrible person. They must have a horrible life. I can't believe they're so nasty, right? You have no idea, but your brain does it. It's an evolutionary thing. It's how we survive. It's how we understand things. It's how we associate. So this study, I'm sorry? Your favorite thing to do about everyone? You ought to be a writer, my friend. No? Okay, fair enough. But yeah, I think it's a lot of people's favorite thing to do. You know, oftentimes we do it to make ourselves feel better about our own situation, right? So we go, hey, at least I'm not that person. Their life really stinks. So let's check this out. And so this was a study where they said, okay, we're going to take some, you'll see it in a second, we're going to take some shapes and animate them, right? They're just shapes on paper. But look at this and think about what story you're actually seeing. simpler. Okay, so they showed that to 34 students. 33 of them had a story. One of them said, hey, it's just shapes on paper. I don't know what was wrong with that one.
They were in the wrong class.
What did you all see? A fight? Who was the antagonist in that? Who was the aggressor in that fight?
Was this kind of like the big Karate Kid where every had it wrong for years?
No, there's.
I want to say it's the bigger triangle.
I'll let you know when it's a trick question. This is not a trick question.
I feel like it was the other two. Like, I feel like the big triangle was kind of minding his business.
Why are people referring to it as the big triangle like it's negative? The
For Gran Torino?
That's what it looked like, right? Like he was minding his business when they came in messing with his shit.
That's what I'm saying. Like the Karate Kid.
Little ball was a heroin addict.
So what kind of person was the big triangle? What kind of person was the little triangle? What kind of person was the circle? The circle was feminine? You saw two parents and a kid?
The big triangle was like the dad, and the little triangle was the mom, and then the circle was the little kid. I don't know why. Maybe it was a family mindset, but that's what I thought.
Yeah.
The triangle was the dad, the little triangle was the boyfriend, and the little ball was the girlfriend.
Big triangle, little triangle being related? Yeah. Well, yeah, our brain would, for closure reasons, we would say, okay, those two shapes, so there's the associative. Those shapes, there's something similar to them, even though they're different in size, so there's a relation, for sure. But yet, other people will also say that the circle and the triangle have a relationship. You're saying related, there's different relationship, right? Because obviously they were on the screen, well, they were together, and they came into it, and they left together. Yeah, true, similar size. Is there anybody in this room who didn't see a narrative? No? Okay, cool. Okay, so why story is important, right? It's the most persuasive way to give out facts. It's the only way that people, not the only way, but the most effective way people will retain those facts. It helps us to establish patterns, associations. We look for it. It's how the brain works. Hopefully that was what you got out of that example, was that our brain is always going to look for a narrative and stuff, even if it's just shapes moving around, badly shot in the 40s, or a still frame. So let's talk about story structure then. And this goes to what you had said earlier, that the 3-act, a beginning, a middle, and an end. So we have the 3-act structure, which is probably the most common I guess is common or most well-known story paradigm, right? And as you said, beginning, middle, end. That's basically the 3 acts. So in the first act, we have the setup. That is where you get out all of the exposition. Who is the character? Where is the character? What is the time period? What do they want? What is the tone of the piece? This is where you give out all the information so the audience can understand the context of the story. It's important that the first act is about context. So this is where you do establishing things. At the end of the first act, you have to have a turning point. Some might refer to it as an inciting incident or a plot point. They all mean the same thing, right? Something must happen that sets the story in motion. Something that we did not anticipate that changes the story and sets it in a different direction. So an example I like to use, of course, is an easy one, and most people are familiar with it, the film Rocky, right? In Act 1, we get to meet Rocky. Who is Rocky? You all have seen Rocky, right? I'm sorry? Yeah, he's basically a bum, right? He's a thug. He works as a strong man to collect money, right? He's a wannabe, he wants to be a boxer, but he can't even pay his rent at the rink, right? He loses his locker. He's pretty down and out. Then at the end, he lives alone, right? His best friend's a turtle, so he's pretty much a loser. Then at the end of Act 1, what happens? You knew that from memory, right? Yes, he gets challenged by, or he gets the chance to fight Apollo Creed, right? The world champion of boxing. And so that's a major turning point, right? That's something we didn't see coming, unless we saw the trailer and preview and all, but if we didn't see that in the story. And so that's an inciting incident. And that sends the story in a different direction. So it's now not just about this guy who's a bum. Now it's about a bum who's actually going to get in the ring with a world-class boxer, the world champion of boxing. And that's what propels us into Act 2. Act 2, we also call it the confrontation. It's where we have conflict, and more conflict. It's all about your character's dramatic needs. Act 2 is all about them trying to get to that final goal. And so this is where, if we're working in long form, you interject other small narratives, other characters. You know, Rocky ends up getting romantically entwined. He has a falling out with his friend. There's a whole bunch of happens, but it's all about leading up to the third act. At the end of your second act, you have to have another major plot point or inciting incident. Here, I use an example. We could go back to Rocky. Rocky doesn't really have, in my argument, not a very strong plot point at the end of Act 2. Does anybody know what the plot point is in Rocky? The second one, second major one? Yeah, right. He was going to quit and he was going to give up. And then he realizes that, wait a minute, it's not about winning. It's about staying in the ring for 12 rounds and proving to myself that I'm worth something. Right? So it's not like a massive plot point. It's more of an internal conflict where he realizes that it's not going to be, I'm not going to go in there and try to win. I'm just going to go in there and prove to myself that I'm worth something in life. And so that was the plot point. This is a much bigger one. Anyone who's familiar with Star Wars, Luke finds out that Darth Vader is, I'm sorry if I'm ruining this for anybody. If you haven't seen it, my apologies. Do they freak out? Nice. How do you have time to watch videos of kids watching videos? I'm very envious of you. But so he finds out that Darth Vader is his father. That's a massive plot point. I think if we talk about story structure, Chinatown, the film Chinatown is a great film to look at for story structure, right? We have the first plot point in Chinatown is what? So we understand who Jake Gittes is, right? We understand the character. He is a private investigator. He gets hired by somebody to spy on Mr. Mulray, right? You're all familiar with the film? No? Then I won't tell you all the plot points then, because that would ruin it for you. And I'm looking forward to the day where you actually watch it and I see a video of you finding out who she really is. I'll tell you the first plot point, though. He's hired to do a job to investigate, right? This woman comes in and she says, I believe my husband is cheating on me. I'd like you to find out and get some proof that he's cheating on me. Her husband happens to be a public figure. He is the head of the Department of Water and of Los Angeles. So he goes out doing his job, and he finds Mr. Mulray out on a date with very young, much younger than the woman who came in his office, attractive woman, and they're kissing and holding hands. So he takes some photographs. Those photographs get leaked to the paper. He thinks his job is done. He's feeling very proud of himself. And that's all in the opening act, right? We're learning about who this character is, the context. We understand where the character is, the time period. And then into his office walks the woman from the photographs. And she says, Mr. Gittes, do you know me? And in the way that only Jack can do it, he looks over very slyly and says, no, I think I'd remember you. And she says, so we've never met. And he says, nope, can't say we have. And she says, well, if we've never met, how the hell did I hire you to spy on my husband? And just like you're saying, what? In your head, that's what the character was saying. What is that about? So he was actually set up. The woman who came in and said that, I want you to spy on my husband, that wasn't her husband. He was taking photographs of the real husband and wife unwittingly. He didn't know that that was the real wife. And so now the story is not about some private investigator just spying on cheating spouses. Now it's about who set him up, and more importantly, why did they set him up? And so that's what sets the whole story in motion. Yeah, it's Chinatown. No. No.
You probably actually
Yeah.
have seen like clips of it and reference other.
Yeah, I'm sure you've seen it like in Family Guy or in Mater's Tall Tales. Yeah, it is a good movie. It's actually considered one of the best written movies of all time, written by Robert Towne. That's why people like to use it for talk about story structure, because there's also a really massive inciting incident towards the end of Act 2, which I won't tell you about, because that'll get you to watch it. And then the third act. The third act is the resolution, right? Resolving it. How did the person change? Did they get their goal? Did they not get their goal? What penalty did they have to pay to achieve it? But that is how we wrap it all up. So that's the three-act structure. All stories follow the three-act structure. Right? We don't like to think about things like art and storytelling and filmmaking as formulaic, but it boils down to a formula. There are the three acts. There's not a film that you've ever seen that doesn't, well, I can't say that because there are no absolutes. Probably not a film that you've seen that doesn't work in the three-act structure. Usually at this point, someone raises their hand and says, you ever seen Pulp Fiction? And I say, yeah, well, that was actually written in three-act. He just told it differently, right? He just broke it up. Memento, three-act structure. Any of these films that change the order of which they tell it doesn't mean that it doesn't actually, if you put it in correct order, still have the three-act structure to it. And so when you're writing your stories, again, whether they're fictional or not, think about the three-act structure and how that works. I'm more of a visual thinker, so this is something that helps me when I'm developing a story, is I will actually, in my office, take some tape and put it along the wall, and then just put some tape marks for, the opening, and then getting into the second act, and then getting into the third act, and I put down my plot points, and that's how I map it out. And again, if we're thinking in formula, the first act should be a quarter of the story, the second act a half, and then the third act a quarter of your story as well. So obviously if you're doing like a 4-page short, act 1 is 1 page, right? And then your second act is 2 pages, and the third act would be 1 page. But this helps me because what I do then is I'll take Post-it notes, different color Post-it notes for different characters, and then I write out just one sentence about the scenes, and each character gets a color, and then I start placing the scenes along the tape lines and seeing where they would fit, seeing if the inciting incidents are strong enough, seeing if I have enough conflict in Act 2 or the middle. And so again, that helps. And also seeing the different colors and seeing the frequency at which the characters appear, it kind of gives me an idea of the flow of it and the pacing of the overall film, and certainly the act. So if that's something that would work for you, please take it and do it. Any questions about the three-act structure? So the three-act structure doesn't apply just to the overall story. The three-act structure also applies to every scene within your story. Now, there's nothing that says that you have to show every single part of the three-act structure, but you should be writing it for every scene that is within your story. And so to illustrate that, I want to show you a scene from Jaws, a film that you're probably familiar with. And then, because the idea is that, for me, this scene very clearly has the three-act structure outlined. And so I want to see if you're able to identify it. I hope this doesn't happen every time I want to show you a clip. This should have audio, though. Do we have Can we, well, I mean, actually, if we're here talking about visual storytelling, it makes actually sense not to have the audio, but you can't watch Jaws without the audio. I mean, so much of the story is the soundtrack. So I promised you when we played it earlier, we had some audio. Yeah, it was. Remember I said, I jinxed us anyway. I said everything's working perfectly. I don't think that. I don't think so. Because that's you can try. No, let's try. I don't want to shoot down any idea.
I don't know. Okay, some of you are techies, like in the room. Who's that? Yeah.
It did work this morning. All right, you know what? Let's watch it without audio, because then we can talk about what we saw. You want me to give you like a play-by-play? You want me to do the? You want me to do the voices as well too? Mom, can I go back in the water? Look at your hands. You're a prune. That's a line. You're more worried about the dog than the lady? You don't love ladies? All right. Thank you all for turning Jaws into a comedy. We didn't hear it, but did you see the three-act structure? What was the the opening, the first act? What happens?
Great day at the beach.
Yeah. Great. It's a nice day at the beach. We understand where we are. We establish the characters, right? The one lady goes walking this way, drawing our attention. The boy comes out of the water. Right? We're introduced to the boy. We're introduced to his mom. We're introduced to the guy with the dog. And we're introduced to the chief. Those are the important characters, right? So that sets it up. We understand where we are, what the time is, who the different characters are. So that gives us the context. What would be the first turning point? Possibly, and possible. Those could be turning points as well. Any other? Yeah, those are little minor ones, right? Because the director is playing with us, right? The director is manipulating us, obscuring our vision with the wipes, and then bring us closer and closer to our main character. I'm sorry? Well, yes, that I think happens towards the end of Act 2. But yes, that is certainly without doubt. That is a plot point. You said anticipation? Right. Right, that's drama, right? That's what we're talking about. Anticipation mingled with uncertainty. We know something's going to go down, obviously, right? We're back by the water. We know that there's a killer in the water. We just don't know to whom it's going to happen, or if it's actually someone who's going to die or not. We know something is going to happen. I would argue that for me, the first plot point, major turning point, is when, maybe it's because you couldn't hear it, where the boy convinces his mom to let him go back in the water. Because basically what it comes out, if you would have heard it, he comes out and says, "Mom, I just want like 5 more minutes. Can I go back in, please?" And she's like, "You're turning into a prune." And she's like, "Okay, 5 more minutes. That's it," right? And she doesn't want him to go back in, but then he goes back in. Great. And then all the other stuff is the other little obstacles, right? The mayor comes over and is talking to him about a parking space, which you didn't hear, but that's what you would have heard. Harry comes out of the water saying, "We know about you, Chief. You don't like the water." You know, and then so that's an obstacle to his goal. What is the chief's main goal in this scene? Keep people safe. Yeah. So then, what is the second turning point? Where's the dog? Right? The dog disappears. That's a big turning point. Now we know for certain that the shark is out there because the dog is gone. How does it? What is the resolution? Kid dies, the dog is gone. That's the resolution. So the character does not get what they want, right? Which, of course, propels us into the next few scenes. But more importantly, what did we learn about our character here? You all picked up on it. You all laughed. He didn't like the water. Right? That reveals a lot about character. Here's the guy who's supposed to be protecting people from a killer that's in the water, and he's not even going to go in the water himself. He's afraid of the water. That's a massive character flaw, which makes him interesting, right? But also ratchets up the tension and the conflict. So he has not only just the external conflict of trying to keep the island safe. First of all, he's the chief of an island, and he's afraid of water. That's problematic. But so there's also the internal conflict of being afraid of the water, which he's going to have to overcome that if he's going to overcome the physical conflict. So the 3-act structure. So when you're writing your scenes, when you're writing your stories, think about how you're filling out those 3 acts. And this is applicable to all disciplines, right? I mean, again, I consider myself a filmmaker or a media maker, but presentations, advertising campaigns, articles written, all the stuff, story, and then how do you structure that story, the 3-act structure, and what elements are in that story are important if you want to make it effective. A couple of rules to abide by when writing your story is never show the audience anything that they don't want to see. Right? So don't force feed them information. Don't give them boring exposition. You don't keep your audience's attention by giving them information. You keep their attention by withholding information. Right? So pose questions, and then they'll stick around to wait for the answers. So don't use exposition. And then on top of that, respect the intelligence of your audience. So don't give them too much, but also don't feel like you have to give them, you have to sit and explain every single thing. I think this is something, this kind of rule came out of me watching years and years and hundreds of thousands of student films where you'll see a director who, they make a point, right? Whether that's through a shot or through a line of dialogue or whatever it is, and then they make that point again. And they go, just in case you didn't see that, I'm going to make that point again, right? That's talking down to your audience. Respect their intelligence. Audiences are really savvy, especially today. We've spent our lives growing up understanding this visual language. So when in doubt, assume that they understand it. Okay, this is where if you have any questions. So this is where I would like for you all to do a small exercise. I want you to come up with just a short story. So work in groups. I was going to ask you all, but I got in the room a little bit later than you, and you were already seated, so I wasn't going to ask you to get up. What I wanted to ask you is if you're sitting in groups with people from your own discipline, mix that up a little bit. If it's more just randomized, let's just stay the way we are. Because I'd like to bring different viewpoints to it. So what I'd like for you to do is to come up with a story. According to Google, these are current statistics. So these are current stats, and somewhat germane to what you all do, and obviously a very clear problem. But the idea being that someone can read that fact and say 11% of homeless adults are veterans, and then go that's obviously a very disturbing fact. There's something that's wrong. Something need to do something about it, right? But that fact alone is not going to be effective. Effective for fundraising, effective for raising awareness, effective for spurring action. So how do we take these facts and how do we tell a narrative? And then from whose point of view do we tell that narrative? So I'd like to spend maybe just 10, 15 minutes just working through this problem. How could you come up with a story that would get that information out, but that would be in a narrative itself, that would be something that's entertaining, that follows the 3-act structure, that has a hook? Who is our main character? Our main character is the protagonist. That's how we, if that's the person we get our cues for the emotions, right? So who is the person with whom we're empathizing? What is your ultimate goal in that story? So keep in mind the different slides we've been through, and let's work on a quick, short story. And then you're going to get up and present it. Some of you. Not all of you, because then we'd spend the whole rest of the next 2 hours doing that. But this is kind of the way that we, a bit of the New York Film Academy, this is the way we believe that you learn by doing, right? We teach you one quick lesson, and then it's okay, now go do it and see if it works. See what works, doesn't work. You try it. It's a very kind of hands-on, practical approach. We talk about a film director, and we say, who does a director direct? Who does a director direct? What is a director's main job? Yes, that is certainly directing actor performances, and hopefully we'll have enough time today to get into some of those tools. That's on the day of shooting, your number one responsibility is working with the actors, for sure. That is definitely one of the segments that we direct. Who else does a director direct? What else? Yeah. Flow of the story. So why don't we say cast? You said cast, you're saying camera, everyone else. So crew. Or she. Sorry, I was just me being a jerk. Correct, yes. Yeah, you're right. A director is, I always like to say that you're a director, you're not a dictator. Your job is to inspire those creative individuals who come to your set to work to the best of their ability. And how do you inspire them? Well, number one, you inspire them by being the world's most preeminent scholar on that story. No one knows it better than you do. And so that gives you the sense of authority, so people look to you for that. But you also inspire by sharing that vision, whatever that unifying vision is for that story, and then allowing people to make creative choices. Ultimately, you are the decider, but still, you should create an environment in which people feel that they should make suggestions. So it should be a creative, collaborative endeavor on a film set. So they direct their crew, and that's done in pre-production and in production. And they direct their cast, that's done in pre-production and in production. But I think oftentimes we forget about the most important part that they're directing is they're directing the audience. And that gets into this, what I was saying earlier about manipulation and understanding the psychology of how we read the frame and what is that visual language. In all phases of production, a director has to think about what are they saying to the audience? How am I saying that? Why am I making these creative choices? How is that going to be read? How is that going to be received? Because again, it's communication, right? Filmmaking is communication. You're trying to communicate, you're trying to make a point. You're trying to change someone's idea or perception of whatever your story might be about. You have a premise that you're trying to communicate. So just like, hopefully, we choose our words carefully, we choose our shots carefully in filmmaking. We all know people who don't choose their words carefully. They do exist. They don't think about what they're saying. But as someone who's creating media, I hope that you do not fall into that category. I'm going to skip over one slide just for the sake of expediency, but again, these slides will make available for you. So, what is the essential building block in filmmaking? What is the smallest increment, the unit that we use? Kind of already said it, right? We think about like the author of a book using words, the director of a film uses the shots. And the shots make the scenes, and the scenes make the sequences make the acts, and the acts make the film. But we want to break it down to the very smallest increment, and that would be the shot. Just because not everybody in here works with the moving image, what is a shot? Yeah, single uninterrupted clip. That's single uninterrupted clip. The visual area within the frame. Yeah, it's from when a director calls cut to when a director calls. When the director calls action to when they call cut. So a single take could be long, could be short. So what are the different considerations that go into a shot? So when we're breaking down a script, when we're breaking down a story, of course, just like anything that we read, we're always seeing it in our mind's eye, right? We're seeing that story play out. That's always a good indicator of what it should look like when you're putting it together. But that's not always true. So what you do is, what I do when I'm reading a script, the first time obviously I'll read it just to see if it speaks to me, if it resonates. If it doesn't, I'm not going to work on that project. Unless they're paying me a lot of money, because then of course I'm going to do it, right? I just probably won't do a good job of it. So I'm seeing if that script resonates with me on that first reading. The second reading, I'm going back to look for things that maybe to delve a little deeper into the characters, or the characters fully fleshed out. I'm looking at it from a more critical eye. It's going down to the third reading of a script that I start writing in the margins my ideas for shots. Different kind of stream of consciousness. What am I seeing? And just kind of with a pencil, just writing in the margins. Then I go back and read it the fourth time and seeing if I'm still seeing the same images that I was seeing on the third reading and the first and the second reading. And then I start putting together a shot list. So one of the first things I think about is the shot size. So anybody who has any background in filmmaking, this is familiar to you, right? Right? We have different shot sizes: extreme wide, wide, medium close-up, extreme close-up. That's really, so those are different shot sizes, and we think about that as how much information are we giving, or what are we emphasizing in the shot. What we don't always think about is what's on the right-hand side there and in red, and that's actually proxemics theory. Proxemics theory is simply that, and it took a lot of psychologists to come up with this, but it's something that's very obvious. It simply states that as human beings, we maintain distance based on relationship, right? Pretty simple concept. You see it play out all the time. You're on a crowded elevator with strangers. What do? The last thing you do is make eye contact, right? Because they're in your intimate space, but you don't know them intimately, so you're not going to acknowledge their existence, right? We keep certain distances based on relationship. Well, in filmmaking, as a director, we think about it reverse. We say we build relationship based on distance. So if we think about an extreme wide shot, that's very remote, very removed. So if I'm trying to establish a relationship with my character, that's not an effective shot. We think about a close-up or an extreme close-up, that's intimate distance. So if we're that close to somebody, we're going to feel as if we have an intimate relationship with them. So we think about proxemics theory when we're thinking about our shot. So we ask ourselves, what information do I have to give? What is important? But how do I want the audience to feel about my character or my characters? So shot size is one of the considerations. Angle of the camera in relation to the character's eye line. For me, that's my next consideration. So when I was first studying filmmaking, I read lots of books, and something that really resonated with me was a book by Alexander McKendrick. And I actually forget the name of it. It might have been The Sweet Smell of Success. But basically, he had this analogy, and he was talking about the difference between a film director and a theater director. And he was saying in the theater, unless it's like new age immersive theater or theater in the round, everything plays out in the proscenium. You're there, actors here, right? So, but as a film director, you get to walk over and pick up that chair of the audience member and say, hey, I know you don't see this, but hey, check this out. Look at it from over here. Or look at it from over here. Maybe you didn't see what he was doing with his foot. Look at it from over here. And that's what you're doing. Where you place the camera is where you're placing the audience. And I didn't always think about it that way. I always thought about it more from a technical. This is where I'm going to place the camera because that's going to cover what I need to cover. And that's going to uphold the 180-degree rule or the 30-degree rule. But really, we should be thinking about, more importantly, what is the impact? Where am I placing the audience? And so where do you place the camera in relation to the character's eye line? So I'm not talking about height here, but I'm going to talk about is eye line. If you look here, this is you'll see two things. One, that drawing is not my forte. Two, you'll see a character. This is an overhead shot, the nose, the head, and this is the eye line. If you drew a line straight through the person's nose. So where do I place that camera in relation to that eye line? Because that's going to greatly impact the way we feel about that character, or the way we feel about our level of participation within the scene. So I have one camera at like 90 degrees, one at 45, and one at close to 0 degrees. So if I were to conduct an entire workshop, and this is the way I conducted the workshop, and we started talking about story, now we're talking about visual language and how we read the frame. How engaged do you feel in the workshop if this is the way in which it's conducted? Very little, right? You're removed from it. You don't feel like as if you're just watching it. You're not a participant. And that's the way we'd feel if we keep the camera out at 90 degrees. As we bring that closer to 0 degrees, you feel more engaged. You feel more of the character's emotions. We create deeper levels of empathy, deeper levels of tension as we bring that camera closer to 0 degrees. It's the reason why, when someone's speaking in public, they're looking around trying to make eye contact with everybody. So you have that connection. Well, it's the same with where we place the camera. So, okay, what is the size of the shot and where am I placing that? Then I'll think about, what is the height of that camera? This one's probably obvious to all, but we have to choose where we place the height of that camera in relation to the height of our character's eyes. And I could choose neutral. Neutral would be if we keep it right here, right? We're on the same level. Or I could place the camera below where you are now. And there's a reason why an instructor stands up and asks you to sit down. Why is that? Yeah, it draws your attention. It establishes dominance. There's a reason why I think there hasn't been a single president since the advent of TV who's been below 6 feet tall. Most CEOs of companies, most leaders of countries, of banks, of corporations are over 6 feet tall. Is it just by chance that people are taller or smarter? No, of course not. But if we have to physically look up to somebody, psychologically we look up to them. That is a fact. So if we place the camera at a lower level, right, we're saying that character is dominant. So conversely, if we place it at a higher level, it diminishes that character. Right, so where am I placing the camera in relation to their height? The next thing I ask myself, what type of lens, what focal length of lens would I like to use in this shot? Or how am I using lenses in my story to represent what is going on in the story? This is not to be condescending. Is there anybody in the room who doesn't know what focal length is? It's a fair question. Focal length, right? Do we all understand different lenses? Okay, great. Okay, so if we know different lenses, what are the properties of a wide-angle lens visually? What does it look like? Makes things look further away. That's certainly something that we'll see, right? We see that in our phones all the time. You take a picture of something, and you're like, holy hell, I thought it was much closer to that ball game or that moon. That is correct. No, we're talking about two different things, right? So a wider frame would be field of view. Without a doubt, you have a wider field of view, so you're able to capture more of the setting. But you're talking about on the z-axis, distance. Objects appear to be farther away than they are in reality, quite like your passenger side mirror in a car, right? It's the same idea, same principle.
I think being able to see more to the left and right than a normal shot gives you that feeling that you're farther away. Because you're able to see more of the left and right, not the diagonal.
Sure, yeah, it does. I'm not going to disagree with you, but let's say we had two subjects standing in a white space, there was nothing else to see, and you just had them 10 feet apart. If you put on a wide-angle lens, are they still going to look 10 feet apart, even if there's nothing more to see to the edges? They would exaggerate it, right? So a wide-angle lens exaggerates distance, wider field of view, larger depth of field. Sure. I would say I would be a little bit careful about using a wide-angle lens, depending on how short the focal length was in a close-up, simply because it does distort, right? And so it distorts the face too. So often, unless you're doing a film like Terry Gilliam, who likes to use wide-angle lenses, that's the language he uses in his films. So like The Adventures of Baron von Munchausen. Still puzzled? Okay. Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. Anyway, he uses, because his films are very cartoonish and garish, so it works for that. Okay, so if a wide angle exaggerates, a telephoto does what? Compresses space, right? And then a normal renders it most human-like. So sometimes we look at our lenses and we go, okay, this is just, this is a tool, or this is like a technical thing that I have to learn how to operate or overcome. You really think about them as creative choices that you have. And what is it doing in depth of field? What is it doing in the space? What is it doing to your field of view? The biggest thing for me is space. And how is it rendering that space? And what am I actually trying to say in this shot? And let me give you an example. There was if you've ever read the book by Sidney Lumet called On Movie Making, he talks about the film 12 Angry Men. Have you ever seen 12 Angry Men, the original? Not the one with Denzel, the black and white one. The jury one, yeah. So it's a film about 12 guys in a room deliberating over whether or not this boy is guilty of killing his father. The film is about much more than that, right? Because it reveals all different stereotypes and racism and classism and many different things. Ageism, not quite sexism because it's 12 Angry Men. There's no other else in the room. But anyway. So what Lumet said, and the reason why this is relevant to what I'm talking about, is that he said he broke the film down into thirds. The first third he shot all with wide-angle lenses, the second third all with normal lenses, and the third third all with telephoto lenses. Why? So getting closer, bringing you into the story. Sure, right? Okay. Bringing you in the sense that if you're using a telephoto, obviously you don't have the wider field of view, so you're probably isolating the characters, right? And we're getting closer to them. That's certainly part of it. What would be another part of it? Making them seem closer together. Yes, especially if we're shooting, like, say, if they're in a row and we're shooting like down a row of them, they're going to seem like they're stacked on top of each other, for sure. Mm-hmm. So that. It's right in your face. Yeah. Yeah. For all of those reasons is why according to him, the number one reason why I did it was to actually create the illusion without being obvious, so you'd feel on the subconscious level that the room itself was getting smaller, right? Because it started to render space, right? If wide-angle lens, originally our orientation within that room, it felt like a much more spacious room. And then as it goes on, the room just slowly starts to get closer and closer and closer. So creating the sense of claustrophobia, creating the sense of,
You're actually in that, imagine being in a room with 12 other, 12 individuals stuck in the same room,
right,
how that would actually feel.
right. And that's the point, right? Thank you for bringing it up, because that is the point. All of the creative choices you make are based on the story. We're always a slave to the story. And so you ask yourself, how do the characters feel in this moment? And what the way they feel is they want to get the hell out of that room. They feel trapped in that room because they can't go until they come to some type of conclusion. They want to come to a unanimous decision, and they're not getting there. And little by little, he's chipping away at the guilty votes. Anyway, visually representing what was going on in the story. Nobody says, hey, I feel claustrophobic, I want to get out of here, but you start to feel it. You're not even really aware of it. On some level, you are, unless you're sitting there watching it as a filmmaker and going, oh, that wall feels like it's a little bit tighter. You know, it's what Iñárritu did in Birdman. Same idea, but he didn't do it with lenses. They actually physically moved the walls in as that story went along. That was done by the set, but the same idea. The Michael Keaton character feels trapped in the theater. He created a scenario in which he feels like he can't now get out of, and so they started bringing the walls in and making it tighter, and making it tighter, and making it tighter. And so again, visually representing what the character is going through. You can do that through just simply the focal choice, the focal length of your lens, the choice of lens. Then I asked myself, okay, in this shot, does the camera move? If the camera moves, first of all, why? But then how? But please don't forget to ask yourself the question of why. And if you're saying I'm moving the camera because it's cool or it looks badass, that's not why you move the camera, right? You move the camera for a reason. What is going on in the story that would motivate that camera movement? So if a character stands up and you tilt and then they walk and you pan with them, you're very clearly saying to the audience, this character is very important. If they're important enough to move the frame, they're really important. Right? So you're very clearly saying to them, look at this character. And you saw a lot of that misdirection in Jaws that Spielberg was doing. It's like, okay, follow this lady. Nope, let's follow that boy. Nope, and then we're going to land on our main character. Right? So knowing that he's playing with you, they're saying that these characters are significant. And they actually ended up, they were significant. They weren't our main characters, but the boy ends up being, you know, he's part of the story. His death obviously is a very big plot point in the story and moves it forward. But okay, so you're going to move the camera. Why are you going to move the camera? How is it going to move? What is the reason behind that? So if you look at a film by like Jules and Jim by Francois Truffaut, in the early years, in the young years during the start of the romance, everything is handheld. Everything is carefree and lots of movement. And then as they get older and love starts to dwindle and they get set in their ways, everything is handheld and static. On tripod and static. So again, the movement representing different time periods of their lives and the way that they felt, the sense of freedom. If you look at a film like Hunger by Steve McQueen, has anyone ever seen Hunger? Check it out. Either I need to reference better films or y'all need to start watching more films. Yeah, all right. That's homework. Watch more films. Anyway, in this film Hunger, it's a film about these inmates who are on a hunger strike. And I remember there's actually one shot in particular. It's like a 15-minute static shot out at 90 degrees, a two-shot, and you're sitting there for 15 minutes. And even like myself, who appreciates a long take, I'm going, oh, come on! Are you kidding me? It felt like pretentious. Why would you hold me there? And then you start to realize, you go, okay, well, maybe that's the way the characters feel. If the characters are in prison and there's no movement, and they don't have the freedom to get up and to cut and to do those things, maybe the director is trying to make me feel the way the characters feel. Is that the right choice? I don't know. I mean, was it effective? It certainly elicited emotion to me. So maybe it was. It was also the fact, too, that this argument was going on and the argument was going nowhere, right? So he doesn't even cut. It wasn't the fact that it was just a static shot. It was one long 15-minute take with no movement in it. Could that be effective? Again, that's debatable. But at least you know that he was thinking about it. It was done for a reason. It wasn't because we couldn't move the camera, because he had the resources. He figured it wasn't appropriate to move the camera. No. But if you watch that scene, I used to show that scene, and then I had people hating me. So I don't do it anymore. But go back and watch that scene if you can. Like just like put in like 15-minute take hunger, and you'll see it. It's very interesting. He doesn't cut until they change the topic. So there's the priest and there's the prisoner, and they're there and they're talking about the best way for the IRA, the Irish Revolutionary Army, right, to break free from British rule. And he is saying it should be done by force, and of course the priest is saying it should be done through peaceful demonstration, and they're both going back and forth. And neither one of them is changing each other's mind. And so not only is the lack of movement motivated by the setting, what the characters are going through, but it's also the lack of movement in the conversation that they're having. And neither one is seeing each other's side of the argument. They're just sitting there talking to themselves, basically. So he's saying, well, I'm not going to show you, I'm not going to cut, reverse cut, because that would communicate that there's something happening in this. Nothing is happening. Until Michael Fassbender's character starts talking about something that happened when he was a child. And that's when they cut to a medium shot over the shoulder of Michael Fassbender. So there's a reason for it, right? Again, effective, arguably not, but certainly thought out. So then I think, okay, blocking and staging. How am I going to stage the actors? Blocking makes physical what is internal, right? When you place the people in the frame, the relationship to where they're sitting or where they're standing, the distance between them, right? It goes back to proxemics theory on the space, on the screen. Who is, you can, if you have two people in the frame, you can establish dominance by having one person sitting and one person standing. Whoever's taller in the frame, of course, will be read as the more dominant person. If you could establish dominance by having one person on the right-hand side and one person on the left-hand side. The person on the right-hand side, our brain automatically reads as the dominant person. You all know this. Think about every single talk show that you know of. Where does the host sit? On the right-hand side. That's not by accident, right? They know because that's where our focus will go. So where am I placing my actors, my subjects within the frame? I always would sketch that out. And then one of the last things to think about, and this kind of encompasses it all, but is the composition. All of the elements in the frame, how do they play out? Again, using right and left. How am I framing my actors? Something that we know and we feel is that the edges of the frame have energy. So the edges of the frame. So if let me pull up something that has a bit more of a frame to it. The edges of the frame, top, bottom, side, and side, have energy. And the way that it works is that the closer you are to the edge, that energy is pulling out. The closer you are to the middle, that energy inverts and pushes in. The way in which we read it, the way we feel about it. So, if I may, oftentimes it's better to show rather than talk about it. Are those two balls, are they being pushed apart or are they being pulled together? This is not a trick question. I promise I'd tell you if it was a trick question. Are these balls, if they had movement to them, if you were to have to draw an arrow in the direction in which they were going, are they going this way or are they coming this way? There's no right or wrong. But what do you think? Okay, you need a psyche eval. That was the wrong answer. That was the only wrong answer. Yes, sir.
I like, we kind of use this one for our advanced class. My favorite one to show is the beginning of Step Brothers when they first meet. One comes in, and they're standing on opposite ends of the frame. And you can feel that pulling apart, and that's the idea behind that.
Yeah. I might have to steal that sometime. Okay. All right. Since I got a pretty savvy crowd, I'm gonna go through these quick because you all know shot sizes, so I don't need to do that. This represents what I was talking about in proxemics theory, right? As I'm sure you're well aware, we don't take out a tape measure and measure out 12 feet and say, okay, that's public distance. But this just gives you a representation of it and how we as humans keep space based on relationship. We had already talked about compression of space. This is examples of focal length, right? We would have like a wide angle here. These cans look far apart. By the time we get to our telephoto, it looks as if they're almost actually standing right next to each other, when in reality, they're just as far apart as they were in that 24. This has something to do with style of framing. There's something called open versus closed framing. Open and closed framing. And it's a choice that you make in regards to how are you going to frame your images. And so to give you a filmic example, Wes Anderson is closed framing. Right? In closed frame, you feel as if the director is God, and they've created this environment, and that's all that exists. In open framing, you feel as if the director is just showing you what God has created. And so it has more of like a doc feel. It's more open to interpretation. Knowing that, which one is open and which one is closed? The bottom is open, the top is closed. Thank you. Great. The top, I would, that's pretty simple. That's 3 pairs, right? The bottom, I don't know. I mean, there could be a banana over here. It's possible, right? So it's open to interpretation. It's open to the viewer's ideas where the top would be closed. That's a style of framing and a style of filmmaking. Let's get to, I want to show you. So who has seen Road to Perdition? Hey, I hit on one that you all have seen. Not everybody, but some of you. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to watch this. This is just the open. We're not going to watch the whole film, of course. It's about 3 minutes. And I like to show this because I think it does a really good job of showing, first of all, an opening of a film, exposition, but using the visual language. There's a whole lot of information in this if you're paying attention. So we're going to watch this, and then those of you who have not seen the film, you're going to tell us what the film's about. Okay? So don't lie and say you haven't seen it if you've seen it. So I think we have sound, but this one's sound really doesn't matter.
There are many stories about Michael Sullivan. Some say he was a decent man. Some say there was no good in him at all. But I once spent 6 weeks on the road with him in the winter of 1931. This is our story.
Okay. So, what is the film about? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. For sure. Would anybody else have a different interpretation? You're allowed to disagree.
I saw that, but I also saw like the little glimpse of him still being a kid, like the scene at the end,
Mhm.
and like his face whenever he stole the thing, like he still has like that kid, like innocence to him, like you want to root for him in this uphill battle.
And he still loved
see
his
those little
family.
glimpses.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I think your summarization is A, spot on and very succinct. So yes, so the story is about a boy. That much is obvious, right? Because we open up, we're on his back. All the energy is pushing in towards him. The camera's pushing in. We obviously know it's his story, right? Then we get a flashback, and then he's on his bike. And you said struggle. I think it was one of the terms I used.
Visually, he was going against the crowd.
Yes. So visually, so what visually represented the struggle? Yeah. So I think it was the third shot, but we have the boy going from right to left, and we're tracking with him, and everybody else is going from left to right. So he's literally like a salmon swimming upstream, going against the flow of society. So what does that communicate about our character? Because that's what we're doing. We're introducing a character, but no one said anything. Mhm. Mm-hmm. And what does that mean when we see something going from right to left as opposed to left to right? Yeah, it's unnatural. So in certain contexts, it can feel and makes you feel uncomfortable because it's not natural. In this context, it can mean a few things. But one, yeah, he's going against the flow. Also, in your mind, where is everyone else going and where is he going?
They're going to work, he's going to play.
Yeah. Right. In very simple terms, when we see somebody going from right to left, that means returning home. When we see someone going from left to right, that means going out, going on a journey or the starting of something. And so we pick that up. But yes, we see that struggle. In every single shot, he's going against the flow, right? Either he's going this way and the camera's moving with him, people are going that way. He's going right through the traffic, the car's going by him. So we know that it's going to be a struggle. There's also a shot of him biking uphill, right? So all that visually, it's going to be a struggle. Is it a happy story? No. You don't feel that it is?
It's so cold to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't know, I hate the cold, so immediately I'm like,
I mean, it
3
almost,
minutes, I
almost
get the
looks
feeling that he knows he's having a struggle, but he knows how to enjoy life in the midst of a struggle.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
It looks a little desaturated too, which it's kind of like the Band of Brothers series was all desaturated. It
Mhm.
gives you that morose kind of melancholy scene.
Yeah, because saturation represents what?
Brightness and joy and
Joy and life, vitality. Yeah. Yeah, this is like kind of void of life. The only colors in it are browns and grays and blues and some white. Yes, sir?
This isn't necessarily part of the visuals, but it's set up with the narration right at the beginning that he's setting out to tell this story because he thinks this little snippet of time that he was with this person might give an alternate, a contrary perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I thought of.
That is normal, or that is the prevailing perspective of this person.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you kind of, like, I felt like you're going to feel like something's going to happen, and they will, it seems happy in this scene because the mom's looking out the window, they're either friends or brothers playing or whatever, and he's remembering the happy time before we go into the bad time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that not necessarily with the opening narration, I think it also matches like with the imagery because like you already know that he's going to be giving an opposing viewpoint of this individual.
Right.
And so that was part of like the parallel with the imagery.
Mm-hmm. I agree. He briefly mentioned it, but no one really brought it up much. What does he do in the store? What is that scene about?
Getting paid, but he also
Yeah, he steals. He stole a packet of Bugler tobacco.
He also sees it as a joke, though. So with his facial reaction, I feel like he
He does or you do?
Trouble, it's kind of like he's making a funny face at it.
He thinks it's a joke or you do?
I don't. Not that he thinks.
Because we get our cues from our protagonist, so I'm not. So maybe there's no distinction between the two. But
I think the storyteller kind of gives it away too, because he's kind of suspicious, like he's caught him already before.
Mhm.
Yeah, I got that
So
that
kind of
cue
like,
too.
yeah.
Like maybe they caught him, or maybe there wasn't a fair exchange of money for all the effort he was
Like if you're
doing.
stealing
So
something-
he was evening it up by
Could be that
stealing. That kind of got
It
those
could be
types
that
of
he's fulfilling
images
this
in
as
my
a
head.
president, like that man's perspective of is that that man treats him like he's going to steal, so he's like, fine, I will.
Mhm.
I just thought if you're gonna take something, you're not gonna make a funny face whenever he comes back to you. Like when he came back, he like.
I think it was more challenging. That was more challenging. What, you think I did something? Where I looked like, that was more than
did anybody? Yes.
I was gonna say, when I saw the face, I thought he was trying to look like he wasn't doing something.
Like he was
I
innocent,
didn't think he was.
defiant.
Yeah, I thought it was just as a child. Obviously, it was obvious to us that he was overdoing it,
Mhm.
but I think that's what he was trying to do. Just like play it off that he hadn't been doing it.
The first case, and then the second case, and it was like,
I don't know. I wasn't.
You do that one again? Can you do that one to camera? Did anybody sitting in this room judge him? Did you? Judge him is a subjective word.
Because I judged him in a way that I kind of was rooting for him because he was going against the crowd or whatever. But then I felt like he had a purpose for it. Like he understood, because you see him selling newspapers. So at the beginning you're like, oh, he's going against the crowd, like kind of had the same feeling. But then you see him having a purpose.
Mhm.
And even whenever like he stole the stuff, it was almost like he had a thought process behind everything he was doing. Even whenever he was struggling, like you could see it. And I don't know. I just made me judge him and then change my judgment
Sure.
with the difference in emotion.
It does make sense to me. Maybe another question. Did anybody feel bad for the shop clerk? Let me ask you a different question. Is stealing okay? Hide your stuff around that guy. So stealing's not okay, but in this situation it is. Yeah?
Because you forgive him because you see him as innocent.
See, but the difference is that we're having a conversation about it, and people's perspectives are going to change.
Mhm.
But I agree with you that no one watched that in the first scene and was like, "Oh, he's stealing as a bad person."
Right.
They didn't judge him because of the time period, not the time period, but like they said, we don't care about the shopkeeper because he's not a character.
Right.
We care that this kid just spent all day selling papers,
And we don't
and
care
the
about
shopkeeper
characters
took
being
most of
perfect
the coin.
either. We care about seeing the flaws and seeing the growth.
Mm-hmm.
At the character tree.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we don't. Yes. The music made it sense. Mm-hmm. Yeah, if the music was more ominous, or if we put the Jaws soundtrack over this, we might. Yes, sir.
I think the way they built, even though it's kind of sort of scene, they kind of already built that you're supposed to like this person,
Mm-hmm.
no matter what they do. It's kind of like House of Cards, how you like Frank. Everybody watches House of Cards, right? How you like Frank, even though he's technically the bad guy.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, so you kind of like, even though he's the main character, you're like, oh, he's doing something wrong, but you still root for that person.
Yeah, for sure. Sometimes I show just the scene outside of the context of everything else, and everyone still has the same opinion. So, but yes, we've already introduced this character, so we already started to root for him. But sometimes I show just this, and then we go from there. But let's watch it again. That's one shot. That's two shots. It's 3, 4, 5, but that was back to 3. 6 on the boy, 7 on the man, and then 8 back out to our master shot. So, the point that yes, sir.
I got one. So let's say instead of the pipe and whatever
I don't think so. Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah, Homie's definitely not winning any personality contests, that's for sure. And a lot of it does have to do with that. A lot of it does have to do with the fact that we've been introduced to the boy. We already feel a relationship with him. The shop clerk doesn't show any signs of kindness. He actually has a kind of a nasty look on his face, the way he pushes the drawer closed. But, yes, sir? Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It definitely make a difference for sure.
I think going to, like, with that, like, you see the character or whatever, but, like, if you had changed his perspective and maybe look from the perspective of the shop clerk, and all of a sudden you see this kid come in and just take it, and you're like, oh, look at that fun kid. You
Mm-hmm.
stole that.
Yes.
So you kind of see it different. You put yourself in that character's shoes.
Right. That's what Frank Capra said that his secret to filmmaking was. I asked myself, whose scene is it? And then what he means is, but from whose point of view am I going to understand this scene? And thank you. That's actually what I'm getting at. I would make the argument that you could have him act the same way, but if you covered this shot-wise differently, same action, same characters, same music, if you covered it differently, you could have everyone in this room saying, "What a scumbag! How dare that little boy steal from this man?" And so, how do we create point of view then? Well, there are three main tools for creating point of view, for creating empathy for your character. One of them is shot size, right? That goes back to proxemics theory. How large is the character in the frame, or how close do they actually feel to the audience? In this, who had the larger shots? The boy. The boy was in a medium to a medium close-up. The man was in a medium and a wide, and then he had one medium close-up towards the end. So shot size. So the person that we actually feel closer to is going to be the person with whom we empathize. Screen time. Who had the preponderance of the shots? The boy, right? There were 8 shots in there. The boy's in 6 of them. And he gets some shots by himself, too. He owns the screen by himself. So we spend more time with him. The third one is, where's the camera in relation to the character's eye line? So if you remember, we start out here with a wide master shot. Then we go in, and it's right here on the boy, right? We're almost at 0 degrees. For the man, we cover that at 45. For the boy, we're back here seeing his face. For the man, we're back out here at the 45. We're never right in front of the man. So we don't feel that bond. So the boy has more screen time. The boy is larger in the frame. And the camera, you are closer to his eye line. So it didn't matter if he reached in there. I would argue if he reached out, if he pulled out a gun and shot the man, you would go, that guy deserved it. Son of a bitch, cut him. He tried to cheat him out of his newspaper money. But I also think that if you covered it the other way, if you flipped that and had more of the shots of the man, all that stuff, again, you'd go, what is wrong with this kid? Why would he steal from this man? It's a nice man. Maybe he's a moot. Maybe he doesn't know how to talk, but like he's a nice guy. So how do we create empathy? That's how we do it. A few things. Oh, this was just something to show you, because sometimes I get people who say, no, the right-hand side of the screen is not more important than the left-hand side of the screen. And so then I show them this, which you may have seen in some other books. But what is the focal point of that shot? That shot? Yeah. Most people go, the first aid kit, because it's white. Your eye goes to the brightest part of the frame, which is true, but even more so is how we read it, even though she's a bit shadowed. Okay. Any questions thus far? Questions? Feedback? So I have a question for you all, man. Actually, choice. I had naively thought I would get through things quicker than I did. And at this point, I was going to say, let's get back into our groups and let's start coming up with some shots. Taking this exercise a little bit farther with the concepts that you already have. Start thinking about how you would set it up. Do you start with establishing shots? Do you move just into close-ups? You know, maybe in yours would start tighter because yours has a reveal to it. Maybe we don't want to see the whole picture to begin. So that's something that we could do some group work, or we could get into how a director or how this director works with talent. Directing actors? Okay, let's do that. Great. So some of what I'm about to say you might not agree with, which is fine. Not all directors direct actors the same way. And not all actors get directed the same way. So, no, they don't. You're in Tech Week? No? There's no reason not to be nice. Not nice. Anyway, okay. So we'll start with some like do's and don'ts. Some of the things. These are tips that I've learned along the way, either through experience or through from actors' friends or instructors I've had. It's still, I think, working with the actors is arguably the most important skill set that any director would need. Right? All the other stuff like the sound and the lighting and the camera, the composition, the things we've already been talking about that are very important. You collaborate with DPs and sound technicians and all that stuff is very important. And understanding that is great, but there's no one else there for the actors but you. Right? You can't run and hide behind a camera if you're a director. You need to be there for the actors. So I think it's a really important skill to cultivate. And this would go for interviewing. Not everything would work for doc, but some of these techniques would work. Anyway, kind of number one thing. These are some do's and don'ts. You must communicate to the actors in between the shots. They need to hear from you. They need that feedback from their audience, and you are their audience. Again, one of the differences between theater and film for the actor is that in theater they have instant feedback, right? There's the audience. They can feel the energy. They thrive off of that. In film, there might be a crew around, but everyone's trained to turn their back and not make eye contact. They don't have that audience. You are that audience. You need to give them feedback. They need to know how they're doing. This is no insult, but actors can be fragile people. That's actually great. We need people who are in touch with their emotions, who can emote, who are able to cry and to open up. That's important. But that comes with a fair amount of handling. And so you need to know how to communicate with them. When you communicate with the actor, we use what is called privacy in public. You're not, as a director, sitting on set 20 feet from the actor yelling out something about that take in front of everybody else. Because when you're giving a note in the performance, basically what you're saying, and everybody knows it, is that wasn't a good take. Right? And so if you're yelling that on set in front of people, you could be making the actor feel uncomfortable. So use privacy in public. You go up and you give them, like the whisper. Just go up and talk to them, tell them what the note might be. Whatever you communicate, though, it's important that you never communicate anxiety or tension. I can't tell you how many times I've been on set as a cinematographer or as a producer or even just as a gaffer when I was coming up where a director's like, oh, come on, we need to get this shot. Why are we messing this up? Let's go, guys. We're going to get this. We're not going to get my day. That is so counterproductive. Making people feel anxious, that kills all creativity. Tension and anxiety kill creativity. Usually what's happening is that if the take's not working, it's because the actor maybe doesn't feel quite open. They're not quite feeling it. Yelling at them is going to make them so much farther away from where you need them to be. So you might as well just not even open your mouth. So you can be nervous, and you are going to be nervous. That's natural. Martin Scorsese says that on the first day of shooting on every new film, he is so nervous that he feels like he knows nothing. And if you know Martin Scorsese, that guy's like a walking encyclopedia of film. He knows everything, actually, about every film ever made. Because he'll tell you about every single shot he's ever shot. Do not use result-oriented direction. This is something that we fall into all the time, and it's very lazy and it's very easy. Result-oriented direction. That's like, okay, your character's happy, and your character's very sad in the scene, and I want your character to punch the wall, and I need you to cry. Right? You guys got it? That's bad directing. That's result-oriented direction. Why is that character happy? Why is that character sad? Why does he want to punch a wall? Why would he cry? So you don't give results. I think that we have this misconception that actors that you ask them something you ask for an emotion, that you give them something to be. That's not what you do. You give them something to do, and you give them the motivation, the justification through the facts. What are the compelling given circumstances? What has happened in the story? What are the forces at play that would make one feel happy or sad or angry? So don't ask for the result, give the reason. And let them come to the conclusion of how they feel about it. Because if you say to an actor, okay, I need you to play this sad, they go, okay, I got that, because actors will always lie and say they got it because they want to please the director. Right or wrong? Usually, right? Because they want to work again, they want to seem like, okay, I understand that. They rarely call a director out for bad direction. So they go, okay, I got it. And then in their head, they're going, Jonathan said sad. What does he actually mean by that? How sad? What is too sad? What does sadness mean to him? And then they're in their head. But if you give them the facts, if you say, this is what's happened to your character, your best friend from growing up, you just lost them. How does that make you feel? Is this someone who you've spent your entire life, all of your memories, your experiences, you went into service together, they passed away. How does that make you feel? And then the actor says, sad. And you go, yeah, you're right, I would feel sad too. Right? And so you reinforce that emotion. You don't tell them what to be. You give them the facts that would make them be that way. So same with like punching a wall or crying or all. Those are results of something. And so give them something to do, some action. Never ask for a reperformance. That one's very important. So let's say that you set up the camera and you're watching it, and it's the most moving thing you've ever seen between two people, that you're actually sitting there crying yourself. And then you call cut. And then the sound operator comes over and goes, gotta go again, man. Someone stepped on the lines. Or the AC is like, shh, I missed my marks. It was out of focus. Right? That happens. You all know that's probably happened to you. Okay? What you can't do, though, is go up to the actors and say, whatever you did that time, do it like that again. That was amazing. Right? Why? Well, what you can do is give them positive reinforcement. That was a great take. We're going to go again for technical reasons, so they know that it wasn't them. But just never use the language of do it like that again, because then they're going to be thinking about, how did I do it last time? And what moved you was that they were in the moment having a real life experience. There was a reaction to something that they actually felt that moved you. And if you ask them to do it like that again, they're never going to be in that moment having that same experience. So that's over. That's gone. You got to move on. Give them positive reinforcement and go for another take, but don't use that language. Along those same lines, never do a line reading. Don't take an actor's script, right, and say, no, this is how you do it. This is how you say the line. Right? For two reasons. One reason, that's offensive. It's offensive to the actor. You're basically saying, I'm better than you. Do it like me. To which the actor should reply, why don't you do it your goddamn self? They don't, but they should say that. And then two, the second reason is that now you're asking them just to mimic you. So they're not going to be in the moment. Now you're asking them just to follow, okay, mimic, how did Jonathan do it last time? I'm going to do it like he said to do it. Right? And so that will not be good acting. Use the language of permission. Now this one sometimes elicits a chuckle. And I say try this. You don't always have to. And Hitchcock would be rolling over in his grave if he heard someone saying this. But instead of telling an actor what to do, try the language of permission. What do I mean by that? I mean, let's say that I have a character who comes running, and this is my scene, right? It takes place in this room. A character comes running through that door, and I need them to sit in this chair, because that's where my key light is, right? For whatever reason, we lit the set before we blocked it, but let's just say we did that, right? So I need them to sit there, and then I need them to go out that door. Right? So instead of me as a director, what I wouldn't do, I wouldn't say, okay, when you walk in that door, you come and you sit in this chair, you say a line, then get up and walk through that door. What I would say to an actor is, look, so, okay, man, the scene before this, and you've been running for a while. These people have been chasing you for quite a bit. So when you come into this room, you're probably going to be out of breath. If you want to, you can sit in that chair. But I wouldn't sit there too long, because they probably are still following you. So I also probably wouldn't go out that door. If you want to, try that door. What do you think the actor's going to do? Yeah, an actor's going to come through the door, they're going to sit in that chair, and they're going to walk out the door. But what are they going to think? That they decided to do it, right? That they're not just following an order. They made that choice out of free will. And that might seem like a minor distinction, but it's not. Right? I'm glad every time I say something, you shake your head. It makes me feel better, because she just told me that you're an actor. Sometimes it doesn't work. You might get the actor who comes in the room and says, okay, my director said I can do what I want, and they go stand in that corner. That happens. That's where you go, that's an interesting choice. Does that work for my film or not? And if it doesn't, that's when you go, okay, look, I know I said if you want to sit in that chair, but here's why I need you to sit in that chair. And as long as you justify it, as long as you tell an actor why their creative choice wasn't better than your creative choice, they'll go along with it. I always think about like when I was a kid. In other words, like justifying your decisions as a director. Not that you have to. Of course you don't have to. You're the director, right? But I feel like it goes a long way, and it reminds me of when I was a child. When I would want something, whether it was like to have a later curfew or something, and my mom would say, you can't, and I'd say, why? And she'd say, because I'm your mom, right? That always sucked. So don't be, because I'm your mom director, right? Tell them why. Well, because in the story, if you sit in that chair, this is what's going to happen later on, and that's why it's important, right? Because maybe the actors don't see the whole big picture. They know that you do, so long as you justify the choices that you're asking them to make. Make sure the actors receive feedback from only one source. This one sounds obvious, but you sometimes forget this. So if you're on a set where, like, say, the DP or the producer, and if you ever worked on commercials, you know that the client, the agency, everybody is going to want to give feedback to the actors. That's just what they want. They're paying a lot of money to do that. But if you're on a set and you've created the environment in which people feel like they can come up and make suggestions and they're that engaged, that's wonderful. You've done a good job as a director creating an environment where people feel free to express themselves. And you should want that at the appropriate time. But you tell everybody that all information goes to you, and then you decide what you tell the actors. And that goes most of all for other actors. Actors love to say to another actor in a scene something about the performance, about it. They want to give a note to the other actor. And they might think that they're doing it for the betterment of the scene. They're really doing it for the betterment of themselves, because they make them feel better within the scene. That's human nature. I'm not judging them. That's just the way that it works. So along those lines, this might sound crazy, but I would never allow my actors to rehearse if I'm not in the room. So if the actors want to run through a scene, if I can't be there, someone who represents me has to be there. Because inevitably what will happen is that this is human nature, it's dynamics of group, just dynamics of groups, right? One of the actors or two will start to like step up and become like the dominant person, and they'll start giving feedback to the other actors about their performance. And again, that's not their job, that's your job as a director. So there's that reason, and there's also the other reason too, that there's a saying, I don't know if you use it in the military, but practice makes perfect. Imagine drilling, you guys do some drills, and so that's something y'all familiar with? Yeah. Well, that's bullshit. Because if you're practicing the wrong way, you sure as hell ain't perfect. So if the actors are rehearsing a scene and they're interpreting it in a way that doesn't work for your vision, and they come to set, and you go, okay, it's good. Guys, let's run through it once, and you watch it, and you go, oh, whoa, that's not what the scene is about. You're going to spend so much time trying to break them of what they rehearsed that you're going to waste the day. So I say you can't rehearse unless I'm there. And that goes for, like, once I rehearse it with you, then if you want to rehearse, as long as an AD is there, as long as someone else is there to make sure that the actors are not giving each other feedback, because that can create an acrimonious set. I know I said actors can be fragile, but you have to be honest. You have to gain the actor's trust, right? So you have to be honest with them. An actor knows when it wasn't a good take, so don't lie to them. Be like, hey, that take was awesome. We're just going to go for another one just because I want it, right? Because they'll know that you're lying. Marlon Brando said that what he would do if he was working for a director, with a new director for the first time, on purpose, he would just like mail in a take. He would just give a bad take just to wait to see what the director said. And if the director walked up and said, hey, Marlon, that was really great, but we're going to go again for this reason, he said he would just be like, okay, fine, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. And he said he would shut down and do whatever he wanted for the whole rest of the film. So in other words, actors know when it wasn't a good take. So don't lie to them and tell them that it was a good take. But what you don't need to do is to scapegoat the actor, right? It doesn't serve you at all to go up to the actor and say, hey, what's going on? You're not getting this. What's wrong? Or this is not working. This is not what we rehearsed. Why aren't you doing it like we rehearsed? What is a better way of doing it, again, if it's not about ego, is to go up and say, hey, I'm sorry, I wasn't clear during rehearsal. This is what I actually need. Or I apologize, I gave you bad direction, right? Deflect, take the blame. Make them feel, again, what you want to do is free them up, not make them feel bad, and get them to a place where they feel open. Because, again, it's not about ego, right? You can blame yourself, and then let it be about ego when the project's done and you got some really great performances in it. Then you can brag to everybody how great you are and how great your direction is. But in the moment, shoulder the blame. Stand next to the camera. This does not apply in virtual reality. Do not stand next to the camera, because then you'll be in the shot. But stand next to the camera, meaning stand as close as you can to the action without being in the frame. So I don't think it makes for good practice to be looking at a monitor when you're directing a scene. I've worked with lots of very successful directors. Joel Schumacher was like 50 feet from set, had like 4 monitors from 4 different feeds. He never even got, he would walkie in his direction to the actors. So clearly he's very successful, right? Martin Scorsese likes to like hide under the bed or a closet or somewhere and put headphones on and listen to the scene. Everyone has their own technique. For me, I think it's best to stand as close as I can to the actors so they can feel my presence, so they know that I'm there protecting the performance, but also so I can focus on the performance itself. I'm not worried about what's here. Of course I am, but I'll look at playback. I watched rehearsal on the monitor, so all those things like lighting and camera movement and focus, all that's important. That all goes into the visual language. But if I'm focused solely on the performance, and I notice that my mind starts to wander, I lose focus, that's a red flag. If I can't focus on the performance, how am I going to ask an audience to do that? So now I need to go in and diagnose what's wrong in the scene. Maybe it's something with the actor, maybe it's in the writing, who knows? But if I'm focused solely on the performance and then I can't concentrate on it, something's wrong. See, when you're watching the monitor, what are you thinking about? Well, you're looking at all that stuff. You're looking at the framing, you're looking at the camera movement, the focus, the lighting, all those things that are important, but your brain is all split up. It's kind of like also the myth that multitasking is a good thing. Not in the creative arts. Focus on one task and do it well. So looking at a monitor will prevent you from doing that. Give the actors the permission to fail. This can be one of the most powerful tools you have. Let them know it's okay. Don't worry. We have all the time in the world, which is a lie. I know I just said be honest with them, but it's a lie. But we're going to do this multiple times. Or maybe you try something 2 ways. You say, okay, well, this one's not going to be that important because we're also going to try it this way as well. So give them the permission to fail. This one I learned the hard way. So I was directing a TV show. We were shooting down in Miami. And we had this really elaborate opening shot where we had this like 100-foot crane that comes like swooping down through the skyline and then pushes in on the lead actor as she opens up the show with a monologue. We're on take 26. The poor girl's in tears over here because she can't get the lines right. The producer's in my ear going, man, what are you doing? He's like, we don't get this. Like, we don't get this is the open. We need to get this. And we're already up against it with meal penalties. We're not going to get our day. I was a very green director. To be quite honest with you, I was sitting there just like a turtle, with my head tucked in here, and I didn't want any part of it. I'm like, this is not going well. We're at take 26. She's blaming herself. Whose fault is it? Mine. It's my fault. Everyone's looking at the actor, get this right. So much pressure built up on her. It's my fault that we ever even got to that take. And let her get so worked up. So I finally got up, and I walked up to her, and I said, hey, can I see that script real fast? She said, yeah. I grabbed it and said, I threw it. She's like, what are you doing? And I was like, I don't care about that script. She said, well, what do you mean you don't care about the script? I was like, I don't care about those words. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. You're just here to open up the show. You've done this so many times. You can do this. You've got this. Just be the warm, charming person that we know you to be, and just open up the show. And what you say and how you do it really doesn't matter. And she was like, really? And I said, yeah, really. And I turned around, and I was like, oh, shit. Because it mattered a whole hell of a lot, because it went through the screenwriter, the legal team, the producers, everybody wanted to make sure that she got those words right. But I figured, we're not getting anywhere anyway, right? So might as well try something new. Heck, maybe she'll say something better than what's on the paper, and everyone will love it. Anyway, so I get back in my seat, and we set up the shot. The camera comes down, it pushes in, and what do you think happened? Take 28. She got fired. I never worked for that company again. No, she nailed it, verbatim, word for word. She got, exactly in the most perfect tone and wonderful, and that was our shot. Right? But nice and not nice, right? I wasted a good few hours. I could have done that right away, right? So the permission to fail, her thinking that it wasn't that important, no longer made it that important, therefore she was able to do it. Because it wasn't about not having memorization. That's what actors do. Of course she had it memorized. And it wasn't about not being charming. That's what she does. I mean, you know, it was about her being nervous in the moment because so much was made up of this shot. It was like the shot of the day, right? And so much pressure was put on her. And that's my fault. So in other words, as directors, don't scapegoat the actors. You are as responsible for their performance as they are. And you'll see this. You'll see actors who are amazing in one film and then they're total crap in another film. What changed? Well, the writing, so the story, but the director. The actor's skill set didn't change. They didn't all of a sudden go from someone with talent to someone without talent. So keep in mind that you are responsible for their performance. So working with like the non-professional, the untrained actor, I would say that if you can, cast wisely in the sense that cast someone in a role in which they've already done. Right? So if you're casting a mother, she doesn't have to be an actor mother, but make sure that she's a mother. So you can rely on that. You can rely on kind of emotional recall, even though you don't use that terminology with them, but say, hey, you know, like, have your children ever done this, like to you in your real life? Well, that's how this character feels right now. So how would you react in that moment? Or how did you react? That's how you should react now. Right? That's one of the things. Something else that's really important too is that you'll see that the untrained actor, they're oftentimes not actively listening, right? And they don't realize that the act of listening is an important thing. So really what they're doing is they're hearing words, they're waiting for those words to stop, so then they say their words. Right? So just remind them, at times, break it down, make it simple. Look, we're just talking and listening. That's all you're doing. So just listen to that person across from you. Take that in, because what you want is the reaction to those words, right? That's what the camera should be trained on. Something else that we do is give them something to do. Right? That's also something that's hard for the non-actor who's acting, is that they like literally physically don't know what to do with their body. So they start doing weird things. Anyone ever seen the movie Dazed and Confused? Remember that one character who was always like doing this? Yeah. That was the most annoying thing. I don't know about you, but I got halfway through and I wanted to be like, stop touching your nose! Because that's what he was doing through the whole film, right? That's what will happen if they don't know what to do with their body. So give them an activity. Right? So again, if it's like a mother in a scene, like in a kitchen, have her be cooking food. If it's like someone who's working over, if it's a father-son having a conversation, have them be having a football catch or working with a car. Give them an activity. That's different than an action, right? Action and activity are two different things. Like if you're sitting in a doctor's office waiting, the action is waiting, but what are you usually doing? Like on your phone, watching TV, reading a book, right? So give them something to do. Also, you know, just if the non-actor doesn't have lines, they're also oftentimes like, I don't know, I mean, I'm not doing anything. You don't even give me lines. And it's like, no, stop. You're sitting there and you're thinking about all of the wonderful stuff that you want to say, and you're choosing not to say it. Right? So you're still active. You're still thinking about it. Right? So put them in the place and make sure that they're present. Those are some of the things that I work with. Sometimes allowing them to improv the scene a bit, to kind of feel, let the subtext come to the surface, actually speak the subtext can be helpful for them. Sometimes setting up contrary expectations can work too, because the actors are trained to, like, it is training. It's a physical and emotional training to be an actor. Intellectual too, understanding text. But the actor is trained to go into every single shot with the belief that they're going to get what they need to get out of that scene, whatever their objective is, right? Even though that they know, like, let's say that they go into the scene and what their objective is to get that apology from their spouse, and the spouse says, screw off, and they go upstairs, right? That's what's in the scene. So but the actor, even on take 20, is going to go into it expecting to get that thank you or hoping for it. Whereas the non-actor is going to be like, wait a minute, after like take 2, I'm not going to get my objective. So what I will do too, and I don't think it's devious, I think it just helps keep it fresh, is to tell the other actor, okay, in this one, say I'm sorry, or give them what they want, right? Whatever it is, whatever their objective might be, give it to them. Let them get a taste of that, and then rip it away again, right? The next take it away again. But that might keep it fresh for the non-actor, because they're not, again, trained to do it. So keep them busy. Make sure that they understand that they're still thinking about and actively listening. But keep them busy, but break it down to the simple talk and listen. If you are giving marks, I think this was, who was it? Michael Caine said that what he would do when he first started, like the idea of like trying to land onto a mark, because you'll see this from also in some bad acting, you'll see them looking down, like look for the mark. He said have them start at the end, start on the mark, and walk backwards saying the lines, and then wherever the words stop, that's where you should stop. And then naturally they'll end up on that mark by the time the lines are done. Yeah, working with children, don't do it. Just don't do it, right? Yes, that's real life. No, that can be tough. I once, I was producing a feature, and it called for a newborn baby. And I was trying to convince my director that we could use at least a 7-month-old, because that changes the labor laws. If you use a child less than 6 months old, they can only be on set for 1 hour in the state of New York. He wouldn't budge. So I, being the genius that I am, was like, well, then I'm going to cast identical twins. And so I'll get at least 2 hours out of them, and we'll only have to pay them, the family, we have to pay them both anyway, but we have to have a nurse and stuff. But what I didn't realize is that they weren't exactly identical. No, they were identical technically, but one had a huge birthmark. So any of the scenes of like swaddling and changing and bathing, which were like a lot of them, we couldn't end up using. But working with children, this is really important. Well, casting is really the first step. Casting is so important. Mike Nichols used to say that 90% of a director's job is casting. And Mike Nichols is most famous for casting Dustin Hoffman in The Graduate when the script called for a 6'2", blonde-haired, blue-eyed, Southern California kind of surfer boy. Well, that's not, 5'3" Jewish Dustin Hoffman from New York. But The Graduate wouldn't be the film it is today had he looked at the physical traits. Anyway, casting. Sorry, I digress. When casting children, make sure you also interview the parents, because you're casting them as well. Right? It's really important. And then I don't think that with children you should ever give them the script. Just feed them the lines literally right before you shoot that shot. It helps keep it fresh. I don't know if you remember this, but your brain when you're a child, you're a sponge. If you have young kids at home, you know that because you might have slipped up and said something you shouldn't have said one time. And now your son says it every time that you're in an argument with your wife. Right? They're sponges. And then also it kind of keeps it fresh. And so I would do with children is do a lot of improv, get down on their level and actually kind of play a little make-believe, see if they can do that in the casting process, and then literally give them their lines when they're on set. Feed it to them right before you start shooting. But the best way to create trust really is to respect the actor's choices, respect the actor's input. So if an actor comes to you and says, hey, I don't really think my character would say that, or I don't think my character would do that, or I don't think my character would sit in that chair. They're basically saying, so they say that, they say rather what the character would do is this, or this, or this. They're basically saying, if you allow me to do this, it's going to make it more real for me, and it's going to make a better performance. And you have to ask yourself then, is what they're saying detrimental to the story, or can I allow them to make choices and to follow their own instincts? Because you want the actors in the moment following their instincts, following their own impulses, and making creative choices. Giving them that creative freedom will go a long way in creating trust. Also, diagnosing a scene. So when something is going, again, if you're sitting there watching the scene play out, whether it's rehearsal or when it's live if you're shooting, and that red flag goes off that something's wrong, rather than jumping in and calling cut and saying that you're not doing this right, or you're not doing that, or you forgot your objective, go in and ask questions. I like to make the analogy of like a doctor. If you all walked into a doctor's office and you were doing this, and the minute you walk in, he goes, oh, I see you broke your hip. You'd probably walk right back out, right? Because you'd be like, wait a minute, how do you know I broke my hip? It's actually my knee that hurts. So what does a doctor do? A doctor says, oh, I see that you're limping. What hurts? When did it start hurting? Does it hurt more at nighttime, daytime, going up steps, going down steps? So if you see something that's wrong in a scene, instead of going in and saying, this is what's wrong, ask questions. The actors will give you answers, and they'll feel as if their input is important. The compelling given circumstances. So this is where, in rehearsal, you work with the actors one-on-one, And you tell them all of the facts in the story that would create the point of view that you need them to have. So we have this saying, the saying goes, and this is a trick question. I told you I'd tell you. How do you get an actor to do what you want? Right, you don't. You get the actor to want what you need. Right? So this is how we do it. We give them the facts. You tell them, you sit with the actor one-on-one, and you don't do this in front of other actors because they might hear you judging their character, and as a director, we don't judge characters. We never say your character's good or your character's bad, right? Because as humans, we don't judge ourselves, and the actors need to feel justified in the moment. I mean, sometimes we reflect on things we've done that have been bad or good. So we sit with the actor and we tell them all of the facts that would create the feeling. And then we say, how does that make you feel? And what we're listening for is that emotion. So if you were inclined to tell the actor, be happy, or play this sad, or play this elated, or joy, whatever it might be, you give a fact, and then you say, how does that make you feel? And you ask the actor to say, I, not like my character, like she would or he would. Say I, because there's power in personalization. And then once that you get that emotion, or close enough to it, you go, great, you reinforce it. That's exactly how you should feel. That's how I would feel. You have every right to feel that way. Then you say, and I'm going through this really quick, y'all, but then you say, okay, given the fact that you feel that way, what do you want? What do you want? And the actor says, well, I want that person to be sorry for what they did to me. Okay, you're right, they should. But what can they do in this scene that you can see, hear, or feel so you know that they feel sorry? Well, maybe if they gave me a hug. Okay, great. Use the words on paper to get that actor to give you a hug. So this is really important. This is where it gets to where the actor has something to do, an objective. They go into the scene wanting something. And they're going to fight for that something until they get it or until the scene is over. And it's important that it's something that they can see, hear, or feel because they need to know whether or not they got it. It could be something as simple as get them to make eye contact, get them to say hi, get them to leave the room, get them to smile, get them to laugh, whatever it might be. It's very simple objectives, but go in there and get them to do this. Get them to say I love you, whatever it might be. And then once you get the objective, then you say, so that what? Or why? What does it mean? What if they don't say I'm sorry? Well, then I guess it means that the person's not my friend. Oh, shit. Well, then you better get that apology because that would really stink if someone you thought was your friend has no respect for you. Okay, I'm pretty sure they're going to apologize to you. Go ahead, you go get that apology. And then they go into the scene expecting something, trying very hard for it, and then when they don't get it, then they realize, oh, wait a minute, that means, and then they have the reaction. And that's what you're building up towards. That is what you have the camera out there for, is to capture that reaction. The reaction an actor has to having a real experience, a real emotion that comes over them because they feel as if the sense of loss or a sense of gain. And that all builds up to that. That is way better and much more powerful directing than saying, be angry. Right? This is why you're angry. Given the fact that you're angry, what do you want? Okay, go get that. What happens if you don't get it? That's kind of like the cliff notes of directing a scene. God bless you. You can deal with emotional action. How do you want the other person to feel in order to get that? And it's important to, because we're always breaking it up and shooting it out of order, to remind them what happens in the scene preceding it. But for me, the important things are the facts. How does it make you feel? What do you want? What is at stake? If I can boil it down to those four things. The facts, how does it make you feel? Given you feel that way, what do you want? And what is at stake? I think if you can just go through that. I mean, you don't need to spend 5 hours rehearsing to get to that. It's better if the actor comes up with it themselves. If you don't have time for that, just give them an objective. That's way better than again, telling them how to feel. I remember it stayed with me. Have you ever seen the film Silver Linings Playbook? So I went to a screening, and Julia Stiles was there, and David O. Russell, and some of the producers. And someone asked, they said, Julia, it seemed like there were really wonderful performances. Not seemed like, in my opinion, there were wonderful performances in this film. What was it like working with David? And she said something that at first it took me a while to unpack, but now it makes sense to me and it's resonated with me. She said, working with David was amazing because in every single scene, we as actors felt like he wanted us to win. So it took me a minute to think about what that actually meant. But basically what she was saying is that in every scene, right, we all have an objective. There's a scene need. There's a reason why your character enters that scene, right? Otherwise, there's no point in that scene. Well, in order for there to be drama, those characters have to want opposing things. If everybody wants the same thing, then there's no drama, then there's no story. Okay, so if we understand that in every scene, everybody wants something, and those things are opposed, then we have to understand that there's no way that David or Russell wanted all of them to actually get what they wanted, because that's not possible, right? Not everybody can win. But he gave the illusion, as a director, he gave them the confidence and the illusion that he was in their corner and he wanted them to get what they wanted, which then gave them the confidence to go into the scene and fight for it very hard, which then, of course, created great performances. And so that's my understanding of what she meant by that. Okay. Well, thank you for staying awake. I appreciate it. If you all have no questions, it's thank you for your time. Again, hopefully it's some of the stuff that you can use in class with your students. I would love someday to have this be reversed, to hear from you all. Because I know that I have a lot to learn. I know that you have a lot to give. So anyway, someday we'll do that. Today it was me. Anyway, thank you for having me. It was great.